Okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit about joints and just basic stuff that I do. Everybody's got their own way of dealing with joints and joint rotations and joint rotate axis. Um, so some things have popped up recently that, there's a lot I don't know, but there's sort of like tricks and whatever you want to call it that just how I work and seems to work for me. Um, so one thing is you'll notice when you draw a joint chain, let's see, I'll go back to skeleton, create joints. If you draw them in, um, your perspective, you're gonna get something weird. I try to never do that because it's always gonna try and find a plane to put them on, and often that's not what you want. Granted, you can use. Let's get me an alligator's cool, right? Hey, where is he? I never use this tool. Sorry. How about that? There we go. Cool. One of the things that's pretty cool is this thing. In your snapping, you can turn on center, and that is cool because what it will try and do, and I still don't do this, but what it'll try and do is find the middle and put your joint there, right? And you'll see that the icon has changed to a little circle to see that it's matching. But if you're doing something like this back leg here, that can get a little difficult. Like you're going to click there, right? It should place it somewhat where you want it. That's not a great place, but that's where I'm going to put it. But if I want to get this knee, not terrible. It depends on how accurate you want to be with your rig, right? But the resulting joint chain is not going to be something that I'm going to use. Just because I know that the rotations are going to be off and stuff like that. So I've been experimenting with getting better local rotation axis. And so what you always want to do when working with joints is turn on the local rotation axis. You could do this for all objects or anything with a tag or transform on it. So if you go into transform display, there's a thing called local rotation axes. I have it here as part of my hotkeys, so I can just quickly, select HI to select hierarchy, right? So I get my hierarchy, and then toggle rotation axes. And then if for whatever reason, what I have found is when I'm working on my rigs, I'll have a whole bunch of local LRAs showing for all my characters, or all my joints, but maybe not all of them, and it gets a little confusing. So I just put in here this toggle-state 0-local axis. And basically what that's going to do is just turn them all off. That way you don't end up with like some showing, not showing. Because if you're animating, you don't want to see those things. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and show them on both these joint chains. And I just wanted to point out a few things and hopefully how to fix them. If you look at this tail joint that I did, which way does he go? There we go. Cool. You notice that that last one is set to, we're going to call it like world space. It's not really world space, but it's not critical that this last joint, well, it depends on how you bind, but normally it's not critical that that last local rotation axis matches the rest of your joint chain. However, I do like to have it match, because often what I'll do is I'll just do a select HI and then rotate, and you notice that when I try and, what I'm thinking is my X is not, it's actually my Y, right? But then that last joint doesn't match. So I'm getting unexpected results. Again, it depends on how you rig. It depends on how you use that last joint. A lot of people never animate the last joint. They use it as like a null. So it's like if this was like a finger, that would be the very tip of the finger, just so it selects, it eats up some of the weighting. When you weight it, you don't need it, but a lot of the weighting algorithms like having that last joint there. You've probably found that if you bind something and you don't have that last joint, when you go to bend this, you get this weird softening or shrinkage of the finger joint that you don't want. So often I'll go and make sure that that last joint is matching all the others. And also in this case, the Y is aiming down. For something like a tail or something like that, or even like hips, I like to try and match it to world space instead. And also, lastly, I would also normally build this joint chain straight and not trust that center snapping did a great job. So what I'm going to do is actually just select all these guys, and I want to fix the joint chain. So As you know, in Maya, most people write Bell scripts to do stuff. A lot of them are very basic. I'm just like everybody else. I have made a Python script here for quickly, changing my local rotation axes and stuff like that. You don't have to use a script to do that. There are different ways to do it. For years and years and years, I've done it this way. So if you actually go into your component mode and turn everything off, the very last thing you have here is a little question mark. If you right click on that, you'll see it says local rotation axes. So this is your selection hierarchy. When you're in component mode, it's not quite as hierarchical as in when you're in your object space. So object space, like selection handles and IK handles, will always be, if you do a marquee select, if you do a marquee select, you're gonna get those things first, then you're gonna get joints, then you're gonna get curves, then you get geo. That's how it's supposed to work. It's been sort of fading a little bit in current versions of Maya, but when you're in component mode, it's kind of like select what you select. It loses some of that hierarchy stuff. So what I do is I turn everything off, and then I go in here and turn on local rotation axes. And what's cool about that, and if I have, you'll see what happens if I select. First I select, I get the joint. Wait, let me start over. Okay, cool. Oh, deselect, cool. So the first time I select, the joint turns blue, but it looks like I've done nothing. And I'm hitting WER and I'm getting nothing. But if I select again, you notice I now get a weird little, it's very hard to see because it stays the same size no matter what I do, a little yellow mark there, and that's my local rotation axes. And if I look at my attribute editor here, what you're looking at is your joint orientation. So if I go in here and move this, you see that it's doing a couple different things. It's changing the rotate axis and it's changing the joint orient. So it's an offset between the two of them. If I go back to object mode, select this. This is my rotate axis, let's say. And then if I go to component mode and move that over here, what I'm looking at for this rotation axis is actually the offset between them. Normally you don't want to have any values in here, and I'll show you how to get rid of that in just a second. More importantly is you don't want your axis to not go down your joint chain 99.5% of the time. There are times I've built in some mechanical rigs where I will have that could be completely different for the IK to work or for FK to work because it's not a normal arm chain and it has some wonky, you've seen character rigs that have like bent legs and stuff like that you mechanically probably wouldn't work in real life, but you don't want to use a regular joint chain because you'd end up using 100 joints just to make one or two that does what you want to do. So anyway, when you move these things, very important, you don't want to you almost always want to be in gimbal mode, or wait, no, sorry, I guess you do want to be in object mode. Sorry, I used to use gimbal. So familiar with using gimbal. Okay, when you move it, you generally don't want to change it in your Z or your Y if you're using standard rotation orders. Sorry, my thing's blowing up. But you can rotate in the X-axis to get different up values and things like that. And this does work with the snapping. So you hold down J. I'm going to snap at 15 degrees, I think by default. If I open up the rotate tool, one thing that you really want to be aware of with the rotate tool, I got to show geometry. Hello. Is that when you are using snapping, right? I think by default, and this is sort of strange to me, I'm gonna hold down J. Okay, it's set to relative. That's what you want. I think by default it might be set to absolute, and that can be a little bit, most of the time you don't want that. So say I have an object like this, and I just want to, snap it over in degrees for whatever reason. If I have it set to absolute, snapping, I have to turn it on to see it, and I do this. Watch what happens when I go to snap it. Did you see that first little movement it made? So that first little movement it's making is setting to an absolute rotation. But if I have it set to relative, and I do that same thing, oop, I went a little quick, so let me go slower. It's only going to snap 15 degrees from that original location, which is what you want. The other way, it's going to snap to something and then do 15 degrees implements. And you can change what that value is. So make sure you have it on relative. Otherwise, you'll get that guy trying to snap to an absolute position and then snapping to the new position. Okay, so let's say I want all these guys to have Y up. And this used to work, but I don't think it works anymore. So let's try it. Oh, cool, it did. I think, yeah, I just can't marquee select. I think you used to be able to marquee select and get all of them in a hierarchy, but now I have to hold down Shift and go up the joint chain. I can probably go down the joint chain. Yeah, that works as well. Cool. I'm not going to worry about the last one yet. I'm going to hit E, hold down J, snap, 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 snap. Cool. Make sure it's how you want it, which when it built, since it wasn't straight, you see that I get a little bit of weird curvature there. So again, this is also something I probably wouldn't do. I would normally build that joint chain straight. However, in a pinch, you can do this sort of stuff. And let's say you're like, you know what? I'm just going to go in here and risk it all and try and get these guys aligned because I need this joint chain to look like that. Well, that's fine. All right, so the first thing you'll notice is that you do have degree information in your rotate axis as well as in your joint orient. I tend not to care what's in the joint orient, but I do want my rotate axis to match. And basically what that means is if I look at my translates here and I'm in object space for my translates, and it doesn't matter what you're in for your rotates, is that the X, Y, and Z match what you're getting for your joint chain. So I'm sure there's a way somewhere to do this, but I learned a long time ago, just use a very, very, very simple Mel script, which is joint-E-ZSO. And what you'll see is that now I have these guys lining up and there's no more information in my rotate axis. So if I select everything and run that script, you'll see that now all my rotates make sense the way I would want them to be. Whoops. So your translates and your rotates now match each other, except for, of course, our last one we haven't done yet. So the last one here, if I run that script, you'll see it matches the way it is. But I do want it to match its parent. So something to remember in Maya is that your parents are the same thing as your world. So it becomes your new world space when you get parented, if that makes sense. By default, if you're unparented, your world space is, the default Maya universe. If you parent something, that's now become your new world. And this is where people get a little bit confused, but it's not a big deal. So if I go into skeleton, orient joint, I can go in here and I can say orient, I think I already, let me just reset it. Yeah, cool. I'm going to say orient joint to world. And when I do that, you see now it matches to the original. And it also does that ZSO for me by default. This tool will do that. I don't always use the orient joint options tool. I usually just do it by hand or use my little script. And just so you know, this little script, all this is saying is rotate 90. That's it, nothing else. And you'll notice that it doesn't do my ZSO because there are times I don't want that to match. For instance, if you're doing arms on a character, so let's say that we were happy with this and we do a mirror on that skeleton. Again, this is the kind of thing I end up scripting, but it's no big deal. You know what? Let's name them real quick. Let's call them L leg and underscore joint. I always do that so that I have, side, what it is, and then use padding of 2. When I mirror this, if I have left and right, it now has right over here. And what I want you to take a look at, even though my orients, my local rotation axes are not correct, but I will fix that. Actually, you know what? Change that to behavior. Bam, there we go. That is what I want, even though this is not what I want my leg to actually be. If I look at that now, you can see that my axes are actually aimed X up, which is what we want for our rotations, right? That makes sense. If I was to grab both hips and bring them up, that's the desired behavior. Behavior, not orientation. However, if I'm doing anything with stretching or anything like that, I generally don't want negatives on my translate axis. So your joints should only have not your parent joint because that's in its world space. But your children joints should only have information in their translate X because that's going to be the length of the joint. And usually that's what people are using to determine any sort of stretching and things like that with the math. So rather than have it be negative, and also I think, let me just see. Yeah, probably not what I want if I'm an animator and I want to move these guys. Granted, this would be in the rig, not on the joint, but it's okay. It's on the joint right now. That's probably not the desired behavior, at least it isn't for me. So what I'm going to do is just grab all these guys and hit component mode and bing, bang, boom. All right, I've got all 3 of them. I'm going to hold down J, snap, 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 snap. And now they've gone the opposite direction, which again is not what I want for orientation, but it is what I want for translation. I'm going to go up here and say joint dash use as ZSO. Now my local rotation, or my rotate axes should have like a 180 in them. Oh wait, I haven't changed them back, sorry. And now I'm gonna grab all these guys again, component mode, sorry. And I'm gonna drive it back to what it was. Make sure you're holding J. And I think I gotta do one more. If I had set my rotations to something like 90 or 45, it may have been easier. But I leave it at default because I often, as I move from studio to studio, I may not remember to set that. So I kind of just leave it at 15 so I know I'm probably going to have 15 there. If I remember, I'll set it to 45, but often I'll just leave it there. Okay, so now if I look at these guys, you see in my X value, I have 180 on all of them, but I do have my translations going the right way. And that's why in the tool that I've written, I will only rotate. I won't do the ZSO because I want a different value and I'm cool with having that rotate axis information in there. Other programs might, balk at this. I was recently using Unreal. Unreal doesn't seem to care at all, but that's also because I'm super new to Unreal, so I don't know yet. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop the video there because I have a lot more to talk about with joints and joint orientation and things like that, naming joints, other things, but I do have to get to work. So what I'm going to do is pause the video there. If you have any questions about what I've gone over so far, please let me know. If you like what you've seen so far, please let me know. And I'll put up a part 2 sometime soon about adjusting your rotation angles. But yeah, for now, I think I'm going to stop that there because I don't want to ramble any more than I already have. And yeah, I hope that helps.